Hi guys, so today I want to talk through the neuromuscular system. It's the second chapter in your level 2 active IQ manuals. So we talk about nuclear muscle, neuromuscular system. We're talking about muscles. So here you should be able to name and give examples of different types of muscle tissue, identify the basic structure of a skeletal muscle, identify the function of a skeletal muscle, name and locate major anterior and posterior muscles, describe the principles of how skeletal muscles work, describe different types of muscle contraction, name the joint actions brought about by specific muscles, identify different types of muscle fiber, recognize the structure of the nervous system, the function of the nervous system, and describe the immediate effects and long-term effects of exercise on the neuromuscular system. And then recognize changes on the neuromuscular system throughout your lifespan. So let's have a look. We've got 3 different types of muscle tissue. We have smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle, here we're talking about the digestive system. Cardiac is relating to your heart, and skeletal is the muscles, for example, your hamstrings and triceps in this scenario. So smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. Good to remember because it may pop up on your theory exam. Let's have a look individually. So smooth muscle is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, meaning you've got no control. It happens automatically. Smooth spindle shapes, it's involuntary. It's not under our conscious control. So for example, if I need to go and poop, yes, I know. If I need to go and poop, I don't say, no, wait, or I can say, no, wait, but we're going to have a bit of an accident. Your body will automatically want you to go to the bathroom. Found in the digestive system, the blood vessels of the urinary and reproductive systems. It's used in all the processes that maintain the body's internal environment to maintain homeostasis. For example, the muscles of the digestive tract contract to move food through your body. So smooth muscle, autonomic, involuntary. Let's look now at cardiac muscle. Okay, it's found in the heart, the chamber walls in the heart. It's striated, meaning it's striped or streaked, so the muscle fibers are running in straight lines. The main function is to pump blood around the body. It works continuously. It's involuntary, meaning I do not tell my heart when to beat or when not to beat. It happens automatically. It's involuntary, not under conscious control. And the contraction of the heart is controlled by the SA node, the sinoatrial node. Now let's look at what we'll be using mainly in our workouts. So skeletal muscle. It attaches to the bones across tendons, controlled by the somatic nervous system, striated like the heart, so the muscle fibers run in straight lines. Works under conscious control, meaning I control it. So if I want to flex my bicep or my elbow joint, I send a signal to my brain to say I want to flex my elbow joint. The brain will send a message down to the muscles associated in flexing the elbow joint. So it works under conscious or voluntary control. It contracts and pulls the bones to produce locomotion, i.e. movement. It resists the force of gravity to hold you upright. So gravity is always trying to push you down. And if you didn't have the muscles in your body to hold you upright, you would be a big lumpy mess on the floor. skeletal muscles. Okay, so let's look now at the characteristics of the muscle tissue. Muscle tissue has the ability to shorten through contractility. It has the ability to extend and lengthen through extensibility. So here, the muscle's getting shorter, contracts. Here, the muscle gets longer, extends. It has the ability to return to its original shape. So if we see here, my muscle has returned to the original shape after use via elasticity. And it's excitable. It's the ability to respond to stimuli from the nervous system. So if I was to touch my arm, my brain would light up saying, oh, I'm being touched. It gets excited. So contractility, extensibility, elasticity, excitability. Again, good to remember because there may be a question on your exam. Okay, so let's look at anterior skeletal muscles. So anterior meaning front. Already we can see highlighted here are the abductors, or sorry, abductors. So the abductors are on the outside to allow abduction. So abduction away from the body. Let's see what else we have. Can you name any yourself? What can you see? Can you see pectoralis major? Big muscles in the front of your chest. Pectoralis major. Guys, it's important that you start to use the terminology that we're going to use through your fitness journey. So we need to get used to mentioning and saying the names of the skeletal muscle. Because for sure, 100% your clients will know the names of the muscle. So if you don't know the names of the muscles that you're talking about, your clients are going to start to think whether you're the right trainer for them or not. So let's now start getting used to saying the names. So pectoralis major, big muscles in the front of your chest. Bicep brachii, make up your bicep muscles. Rectus abdominis, that make up your tummy muscles in around the area where you want your six-pack to be, rectus abdominis. Deltoids, so here it's pointing mainly at the anterior deltoid. Internal obliques, which run down the sides of your waist and the inner side. Muscles along the front of the thigh are called the quadriceps. Now we have the adductors in the inner thigh to bring the leg back in. So remember, abduction, adduction. The tibialis anterior, which runs down the front of the tibia bone, remember from the skeletal system. External obliques, which lie on the outer side of the waist. Upper trapezius. And iliopsoas that make up part of the hip flexor muscle group. So this is the anterior skeletal muscles. So now let's have a look at the posterior skeletal muscles. What can we see? We have the latissimus dorsi. So if you're thinking about using the lat pull down machine, the muscles you're exercising are the latissimus dorsi. The gluteus maximus in your bum. Hamstring muscle group in the back of your upper leg. Gastrocnemius that make up part of the calf muscle. Soleus or soleus that make up the second part of the calf muscle. Tricep brachii in the back of the arm, upper arm. You've got your hip abductors. Trapezius, remember on the anterior we saw upper trapezius, which are going to be in this area, and now trapezius, we're looking at this V shape in the center of the back. The rhomboids, which lie in behind the trapezius. Erector spinae, which runs up both sides of the spine to keep your spine erect. Okay, so let's now look at the structure of the skeletal muscles. Remember, all muscles join onto the bone via tendons, where we have bone on bone connection over a joint. We have ligaments. So around then, the muscle on the outside is what we call fascia. Fascia is similar to, if you look or think about glad wrap or cling film, it's a film around the outside of the muscle, and it's an interconnective web that connects parts of your leg to the parts of your shoulder. So if you have tight calf muscle, it could affect your shoulder. So if you want to do a little experiment on this, if you grab hold of your t-shirt and you pull it downwards and then try and lift your opposite arm, you may feel a little bit of tightness under your arm. And that's similar to how fascia works. So coming from the fascia, we have then the main part, the muscle belly. This is just what we call the thick part of the muscle. On the top is the epimysium. Remember, from our skeleton, our bones, we have epidermis, epimysium, meaning on top or on the end. Epimysium. Then we start to look in the intersection. So if you were to draw out more fibers from the epimysium, we will have foci. Parts in between the muscle are called the perimysium. And then we're looking at one individual muscle fiber. And if we pull out another strand, we have the myofibril. On the top here, we've got the endomysium around out. So let's have a little look further in depth of the myofibril. Okay. Here in the myofibril, we've got the sarcomere. Inside the sarcomere, we have a thick filament called actin and a thick filament called myosin. Now you need to remember the thick and the thin filament names, thin filament actin, thick filament myosin, because there may be a question on your theory paper. So if we look here, the thin filament, the yellow, is actin, and then the thick filament is myosin. So what we need to know this for is about muscle contraction. So when you flex your elbow joint, the muscle gets smaller, it contracts. So what is happening here is, if we see the little heads on the thick filament called myosin, they reach up and they connect onto the thin filament called actin. So they grab hold, they will then rotate and then reset. So as it attaches onto, as the myosin attaches onto the actin, it will pull, rotate, and release. So if you think about how the movement of a caterpillar would go, it will crawl along. It's similar to the muscle. So the myosin head will grip the actin filament, it will pull, rotate, and then release. So this has this will come more apparent when we start talking about energy systems, where we have ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and ADP, adenosine triphosphate, or adenosine phosphate, ATP and ADP, which we'll talk about later in a different mini lecture. So structure of a myofibril, points to note, thin filament actin, thick filament myosin. Okay, so now we have here muscle fiber type. So you can see from here, we've got type 1, fibers, which we call slow muscle fiber, all the way to type 2B muscle fiber, which we call fast twitch. So we have fast twitch muscle fiber, we have slow twitch muscle fiber, and in between we have type 2A muscle fiber. So we just have a little look at the characteristics of the type 1 muscle fiber. So they're red, which means they're rich in blood supply. They're generally used for aerobic activity. They're rich in mitochondria, which we'll discuss later. They work at a lower force production, and they're very slow to fatigue. So start thinking about the type of athlete that would use type 1 muscle fiber. They use aerobic activity, they produce low force, and they're slow to fatigue. Think about the athlete. Now let's look at type 2B muscle fiber, fast twitch muscle fiber. They're white because they've got poor blood supply. They're anaerobic, meaning without oxygen. They're poor in mitochondria. They work at higher forces, and they're very quick to fatigue. So again, have a think about what athlete would be working anaerobically at high forces, and they're quick to fatigue. So it's a short blast, short, sharp exercise with lots of power, as opposed to aerobic, low power, slow to fatigue. So if you're thinking about type 1 muscle fiber, and you're thinking about perhaps marathon runners, and then if you're thinking about type 2B, you're looking at power lifters, shot putters, where they need a one-off explosive movement, you'd be correct. So let's now look at intermediate. So these fibers can either pick up the characteristics of type 1 muscle fiber, or they can pick up the characteristics of type 2B muscle fiber. So if I'm doing a marathon and I'm up to maybe 22 miles, I've got 4 miles to go, these muscle fibers will be exhausted. So what they will do is they'll go to the type 2A muscle fiber and go, guys, I need some help. I've got 4 miles to do, but my type 1 muscle fiber are burnt out. Can you help? So the type 2A muscle fiber will pick up the characteristics of the type 1 muscle fiber and help out. On the opposite side, then the type 2B muscle fiber, if you're maybe a 100-meter sprinter and you've got to 75 meters, 80 meters, you've got 20 meters to push, you need more muscle fibers recruited to help you get over the line. It will call on the type 2A muscle fibers to take on these characteristics to give you more power to get you over the line. So type 1 muscle fiber, type 2A muscle fiber, and type 2B muscle fiber. Let's now look at the roles of your muscle. So the roles of the muscles can be as the prime mover, or what we call the agonist. This is the main muscle used to create a specific movement. So if I want to do flexion of the elbow joint, the prime mover will be the bicep. Now look at the agonist or the antagonist. It's the muscle that has to relax in order for you to complete elbow flexion. So the agonist is the prime mover of the muscle. The antagonist is the opposite muscle that has to relax in order to you to create a joint movement. So have a look now at your knee joint. If you want to bend your knee or flex your knee, what muscle is the agonist. So knee flexion, you want to bend your knee. What muscles are getting smaller? What muscles are getting longer for you to create knee flexion? So if you're thinking about now, you're bending your knee and your hamstrings are getting smaller, you would be correct. To create knee flexion, the hamstrings need to contract, get smaller. So if you think about the action of a leg curl, knee flexion, the hamstrings are getting smaller, so therefore the quadricep have to get longer in order for you to complete knee flexion. So agonist is the prime mover, antagonist is the opposite muscle that have to relax. Muscles work in pairs. Now let's look now at synergist. We see here, synergist is a muscle that aids or modifies that agonist movement. For example, when we're doing elbow flexion, it gets help from the bicep brachialis. If you think the main muscle is the bicep brachii, the muscle that helps or assists the bicep brachii is the bicep brachialis. So now we need to look at individual muscles rather than muscle groups. Okay, we can still say elbow flexion is caused by now the bicep brachii is the agonist. The antagonists are the tricep muscle group, and the synergist is the bicep brachialis. So let's go back again to knee flexion. So now we know knee flexion is caused by the hamstring muscle group, but what muscle is the prime mover, the agonist, and what muscles are the synergists? So now you're going, oh, I've only just learned hamstrings. Now we're looking at individual muscles. So if you're looking at your hamstring muscle group as the bicep femoris is the agonist that's doing major work, the antagonists are still going to be the quadricep muscle group. The synergists will be the semimembranous and the semitendinous, which make up the three hamstring muscles. So the prime mover in knee flexion, bicep femoris, the synergist, semimembranous, semitendinous. Now, almost finished. We have now what's called the fixator. A fixator muscle that stabilizes a joint where the movement is taking place. So let's go back to our bicep curl. I want to do elbow flexion. We now know the bicep brachii is the prime mover. The tricep muscle group are the antagonists. The synergist is the bicep brachialis. And now the fixator, the muscles that give joint stability in this is the anterior deltoid. So that stabilizes the shoulder joint and the bicep on elbow flexion. So let's go back to our knee flexion. Now I want to flex my knee joint. Remember, the prime mover is going to be the bicep femoris. The antagonist is the quadricep muscle group. The synergists are semimembranous, semitendinous, and the fixator muscles would be the gluteus maximus that's going to give joint stability in the hamstring muscles. Confused? During the course, we'll practice a little bit more. So that is the rules of the muscle. So let's look at different muscle contraction types. You can do that while I have a cup of tea, because there is always time for tea, right? So we're looking at isometric, isotonic, concentric, and eccentric. Looking at isometric first, it is a static contraction of the muscle. The muscle contracts but remains the same length. So for example, if you're doing a static squat against the wall. You're getting your client to stay in one position. The muscles are contracted, but they remain the same length. That would be an isometric contraction. For this example here, the plank would follow the same principles. Isotonic is a dynamic movement. The muscle contracts and changes length by either shortening or lengthening. So elbow flexion, elbow extension, flexion, extension. The joint is in movement, therefore is dynamic, therefore is isotonic. Concentric, the muscle contracts and shortens. So elbow flexion, the bicep will contract concentrically. The muscle contracts and shortens, for example, the upward phase of a bicep curl. Concentric, the bicep will get smaller. Eccentric now, the negative movement, the muscle contracts and lengthens, for example, the downward phase of a bicep curl. So I want to now go from flexion to extension. The bicep is now moving eccentrically. It is contracting and lengthening as we come down. So you probably all come across doing negative reps or eccentric training throughout your own fitness journey. So if we have a look at these, isometric, isotonic, concentric, eccentric, what do you think would be the hardest type of exercise to do? So if you're thinking maybe isometric or eccentric, negative training, you're probably correct. So we're probably looking mainly at eccentric training would be the most difficult. Some diagrams. Okay, let's move on now to the nervous system. So the nervous system is split into 4 different parts. We have the baroreceptors, proprioceptors, the chemoreceptors, and your thermoreceptors. So the main role of the nervous system is to gather information via sensation, to analyze the information for integration, and then respond to the information through the response. Okay, so for example, if I want to pick up my cup and have a drink, first of all, my brain will gather the information. So, am I capable of lifting my cup? Is the liquid going to be warm? Are there any dangers from my seated position to the cup? Can I see the cup correctly? So my brain is gathering all of this information. Then it's analyzing the information. It's going, well, the cup is sitting on the table is flat, the tea has been sitting maybe for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, so it's not going to be very warm. There are no dangers on the floor, so yes, you could probably pick it up. Then the response, pick up and drink. Okay, so this is the process. So now let's look at the receptors. So the baroreceptors detect the changes in blood pressure. So when your client is on the treadmill, or if your client is doing isometric exercises, there will be changes in blood pressure. It's your baroreceptors that will detect that change. Proprioceptors will detect the change in the muscle length and tension. So if you're stretching, the proprioceptors will pick up on the new muscle length, the tendon length, and the tension within the Golgi tendon organ. The chemoreceptors detect changes in chemicals, for example, taste and smell. So if you've ever had the flu, or if you've had a nose that is bunged up, your sense of smell goes. So it's the chemoreceptors that will pick up those changes. And then lastly, thermoreceptors will pick up changes in temperature. So if you're doing the warm-up exercises, as your body is generating more heat, your thermoreceptors will pick up on the new body temperature. So the structure of the nervous system is split into the CNS, the central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system we can split into somatic and autonomic. If you remember, this is somatic, autonomic. So autonomic happens automatically, somatic I can control. Autonomic is controlled then by the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So let's have a little look more in depth. So the central nervous system is everything, your brain and your spinal cord. It's the control base for all your nervous system and the source of all your nerve impulses. So it's basically your brain and your spinal cord. The brain consists of the cerebrum, diencephalon, the cerebellum, and the brain stem. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. Diencephalon consists really of your hypothalamus and your thalamus glands, which you talk mainly more on your level 3 personal trainer qualification. The cerebrum is your medical or your memory bank, and the brainstem connects the brain to the spinal cord. So the peripheral nervous system, let's have a little look. It branches off the nerves, so it subdivides into the somatic, which we can control. For example, all the skeletal muscles, and the autonomic, remember, it's involuntary, like your heart and your digestive system. So somatic, we can control. Autonomic happens automatically. So let's look now how information is sent from your brains to your muscles. So you're going to do an exercise. For example, you're going to do seated row. Your brain then sends signals down your spinal cord. That information is collected by the dendrites. The dendrites will then send that information into the nucleus of the nerve. That information is then sent down the axon. The information that is sent down the axon is called the action potential. Around the outside of the axon is a myelin sheath to protect the axon, and the axon will terminate onto the muscle via a neuromuscular junction. So again, the information is collected by the dendrites. That information is sent into the nucleus of the neuron. That information is sent from the nucleus to the muscle down the axon. The information sent down the axon is called the action potential, and around the axon is a myelin sheath. So if you think about the cable for your telephone charger, inside you've got little wires. Around the outside of that, you've got a hard coating cable to protect the internal wires. So that is similar to the myelin sheath. And then it's terminated onto the neuromuscular junction by the synaptic end bulbs through the neuromuscular junction. Now you may need to remember this sequence, as there may be a question on your theory paper. Okay, so let's look at a motor unit. I'll do another mini talk on the motor unit at a later date, but for now, let's just stick with this presentation. Motor unit is an individual motor unit is composed of a group of muscle fibers, a motor nerve that stimulates these fibers. So here we have the muscle fibers. We've got the muscle fiber nucleus and how it's terminated, and the axon terminating onto the muscle fiber. Okay, so if you think back to your muscle fiber types, how many muscle fiber types do we have? Can you remember? If you're saying 3, then we're good to go. Remember type 1, type 2A, and type 2B muscle fiber types. So let's look at how the motor units are recruited. So to generate a greater amount of force, the nervous system recruits a larger amount of motor units. To the lesser degree of force, the nervous system recruits a smaller amount of motor units. So this is saying that if I want to pick up a lighter weight, I recruit less motor units than I would need if I'm doing a heavier weight. So here we're looking at type 1 muscle fiber all the way to type 2B muscle fiber, and in the middle, type 2A muscle fiber. Okay, so a little diagram here just to show you what I've just discussed. So lower force, type 1, higher force, type 2B. Now, we don't have different color muscle fiber in our body or labels on our muscles. This is just saying that in order to recruit a larger amount of force, your body will need to recruit a larger amount of motor units. So here, type 2B, type 2A, and type 1. Now, let's look at the all or none law. So you may need to remember this because there might be a question in your theory paper. All or none. Firing a nerve within a motor unit will generate the stimulus to fully contract all of the associated muscle fibers. The motor unit is either on or it's off. There's no partial stimulation or contraction of our motor unit or its fibers. Now this, you need to remember. When an impulse is sent down a neuron, all the muscle fibers within that motor unit will be innervated, meaning they will all be contracted. The motor unit will either activate all of its fibers or none of them. So if I go back quickly to this. So if I'm using a lightweight, I only need this amount of motor units to recruit. So all of these muscle fibers will be recruited. These will not be recruited. So I only need these. So if I lift a 5 kg weight, only the type 1 muscle fiber units will be required, but they will all work to create the movement. If I then lift a 10 kilogram weight, I need more motor units because the weight is heavier. So I will recruit type 2A and type 1 muscle fibers to create the movement that I need. If I then go on to a 15 kg weight, I need more motor units to recruit because the weight is heavier. Okay, so let's look now at the effects of the neuromuscular system. So when you start exercising your muscles, immediately you're going to get increased temperature to the muscle. You're going to get increased muscle pliability, so the muscle will be able to stretch and return to its normal position. You're going to get increased power output to the muscles. You're going to get increased nerve to muscle length. So the messages from here to the muscles are going to get faster. And you're going to get increased recruitment of the muscle fibers that you need in order to do your workout. Over a long-term period, you're going to get increased muscle fitness. You're going to get increased glycogen and CP, creatine phosphate, stores in the muscle. You're going to get increased actin and myosin. Remember, thin filament, actin, myosin, thick filament. You're going to get increased basal metabolic rate. Basal metabolic rate is the amount of calories that we need in order just to maintain normal basic functions. So if I was to lie in bed all day, I would need to eat a certain amount of calories to keep my heart going, to keep my lungs working, to keep my diaphragm going up and down, to create digestion and all of my internal processes. I'm going to get better posture because my muscles will be stronger. I'm going to get increased neuromuscular connections. So again, the connections from the muscle to the brain will be increased, and increased recruitment of motor units. So more motor units recruited, the fitter and the more function and capability of the muscle. Over your life cycle, neural pathways develop rapidly in a number to develop coordination, for example. Postural and stabilizing muscles develop quickly. Genetics and environment strongly influence the potential of your neuromuscular development at this stage. There's no significant gender difference when you're prepubescent. The influence of testosterone in boys and estrogen in girls will then separate us on our different pathways. So what we're saying is when we're younger children, we will grow up together. Then as we hit puberty, boys will go off to one side with higher testosterone. Girls will go off to the other side with heightened estrogen. Going into adulthood, neuromuscular develops normally around your mid-20s. With training, this can continue beyond here. By the age of 30, the brain begins to lose thousands of neurons each day, which leads to the processing of information becoming slower. From the age of 60, you're going to lose 1 to 2% of your muscular strength. So if you're working with older clients, having a weight training program is vital. We can't stop the muscular strength, but we can reduce how quickly this happens. Exercise and strength training will help combat the effects of aging. So you should be able to now name and give examples of different muscle tissue. Remember, there are 3. Identify the basic structure skeletal muscles. Identify the function of the skeletal muscle. Name and locate major anterior and posterior muscles. Guys, this is vitally important. Read your muscles, please. Describe the principles, how the skeletal muscles work, different types of contraction, joint actions brought about specific muscles. Remember agonist, antagonist, synergist, fixator. Remember them, please. Identify your muscle fiber types, type 1, type 2A, type 2B. Recognize the structure of the nervous system, information into the dendrites, into the nucleus, down the axon. The information sent down the axon is called the action potential, and the axon joins on to the muscle at the neuromuscular junction. The immediate and long-term effects on the neuromuscular exercise or neuromuscular system, and recognize changes of the neuromuscular system throughout the person's lifespan. So guys, well done on getting through that. If you find it helpful, leave me a comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos that can help you pass either your level 2, your level 3 gym instructor or personal training courses, or if you're just interested in how to build this into your own training. Thank you.